Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy, you can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Today's episode is thanks to our Patreon members and our affiliates and partners. Head to patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition to join our membership or donate to the podcast, and stay tuned to hear about some amazing deals and discounts from our partners, including Prevenix, Inside Tracker, Orgain, Practice Better, and Jen and Carrie. But for now, we're getting right to the show. Enjoy. Hello, fans and listeners. Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, your host of the podcast, owner of Rise Up Nutrition. And I'm here today with Jenna Stranzl. She's been on many other podcasts before. She is our lead nutrition success coach here at Rise Up Nutrition. Jenna, go ahead and say hi.
Hi.
Anything else you want to say about yourself?
Just hello again. Glad to be here.
All right. Amazing. Yes. Hopefully by now, if you're a listener, you're familiar with Jenna. But again, she works directly with our clients in the Fast Track program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation. She's been a sports and performance dietitian for many, many years. And I'm just so grateful to have her on my team. So today we wanted to just have more of like an educational episode about our menstrual cycles. And this actually came about because in our alumni program, which is where if you're a client of ours in the Fast Track, or actually, honestly, any other program. So if you went through the Female Athlete Nutrition online course on your own, or had a call with me and maybe we did a few one-on-one sessions, you can join our alumni program. Our alumni program is an amazing way to learn in-depth nutritional science. We present a new topic every month, and we come together as a group in a community to learn and challenge each other together. And you still have your dietitians, myself and Jenna, to guide you, month to month as needed. And so anyways, our February topic in the alumni program was a deep dive in the menstrual cycles. And just understanding how it affects your nutrition, or maybe how your nutrition might affect your menstrual cycle, how it affects your performance as an athlete. We're not going to give you everything that we talked about in our alumni program, because that's the whole point of being a client. But yeah, we wanted to do an episode to just talk about it, because I've certainly on this podcast shared the importance of like getting your menstrual cycle as a female athlete and just as a human being, as a girl, as a woman. But yeah, we wanted to share some of that with you today. So you ready to get into it, Jenna?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do first want to share some statistics about like what is considered a normal menstrual cycle. And this is something we went over with our alumni girls. And as we're diving into it, I think Jenna and I will just comment on our personal experiences or experiences as a dietitian as to what is in literature normal and what do we see or what have we experienced as normal. So first and foremost, when we talk about like having a normal menstrual cycle or like a regular cycle, something that happens cyclically, normal is considered to be 28 to 35 days long. However, within that, you are not expected, let's say that your cycle was 28 days this month. It is also normal that it's not a perfect 28 days next month. So it is normal for it to be plus or minus 2 to 20 days per cycle. Now, I personally feel that an extension of 20 days is kind of a red flag of why is this late? And I think most people would agree with me on that. But in literature, that is still considered within one person, a normal fluctuation. So 28 to 35 days long, but plus or minus 2 to 20 days per cycle. Does that seem normal to you, Jenna, in your lived experiences?
In my lived experiences, I feel like that's been normal. And then there's also the aspect of like, okay, I almost predict during marathon training that I probably will have a more lengthier cycle. And it's just then leaning in on what some of those things are, like my diet and things like that. But yeah, I would think more so when I was getting out of RED-S, it was very irregular. And now over time, it has now been that, I think, shorter window of 28, unfortunately, to 32 days. I say unfortunately because it's just so short.
I know. That is, for those of us who do have those shorter cycles, it can be a little bit frustrating. And I will say too, within that cycle, when they say plus or minus 2 to 20 days, I think it's a lot more, it's like if you do have a short cycle of, let's say, a 28-day cycle, and okay, so I was stressed this month, or I did ramp up training. That's where I think the plus 20 days would bring you out to 48 days, which is outside of the normal, but still that's 6 weeks or so. And so it's one of those things where we're not going 3 months without a period.
Right. Yep.
And that's really important to remember. And again, so that's where it's like, okay, if your normal's 28 days and suddenly this next cycle around, you're pushing 38 days or something, start to question, why is this happening? But we don't have to freak out.
Right.
Is I think the important thing. We don't have to freak out, but start to question, what did I do differently this month that might be contributing to this?
I can make a really good example of this from one of my friends who isn't necessarily, she's a recreational yogi and rides her cycles. And she had been a week late and very feeling chaotic about it. I need to go to the doctor. What if I'm pregnant? What if this, that, or whatever? And just the emphasis on you literally moved across the pond and life is very stressful, moving, finance changes. And then lo and behold, about 5-6 days later, she did get her period. So it is that like stress can absolutely be a factor.
Yeah. A huge factor. Yeah. I think as somebody who's personally, I'm pregnant right now. And over the last few years, I will say if you are sexually active or that's something, being a week late, you're going to be on it and be like, okay, I'm going to go take a pregnancy test. And that's fair because that's a huge life change as well. So we do want to stay on top of that. But otherwise, it's just be curious, I think.
Curious is a good word.
Yeah. It is also considered normal to have 8 to 12 cycles per year. So again, I think we very often in our culture say like, your cycle's every month. Well, a month, first of all, we're in February. So a month is 28 days and most other months are 30 or 31 days. And it's like, well, you might have one every month and 12 cycles per year. But again, if you are extending out to that cycle of a 35 days long and you do have that one cycle that happened to be an extra 5 days because of stress or something like that, then it could turn out to be maybe just 10 cycles a year or 9 cycles a year. And so again, our society puts that emphasis on make sure you get your monthly cycle, but it's actually more about the days and the cyclical nature of it that matter more so than the month, right?
Yeah. And from what I understand, we can have those in ovulatory cycles as well. So that also may be the difference between a 10 cycle.
That's true too, because so an ovulatory cycle, just from an education standpoint here is, okay, you had a cycle, you bled because there were some things going on with your hormones, but you didn't ovulate. Ovulation is it's when your luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone rise in your mid-cycle, about halfway through. And it's what actually stimulates the creation and release of an egg in your follicle tubes. You're in your follicles of your ovarian tubes. And so that ovulation is as far as properly functioning hormones and I would say a real cycle, it's very important to ovulate. But with that being said, sometimes, we might have in a year 8 healthy cycles and maybe 1 or 2 anovulatory cycles. And we're not promoting that. It's not good for that to happen, but we have seen that, right? So yeah. I think going over a few more things of what is normal as we're talking about what is normal too, as you're going through puberty, do not expect your period to be normal right away. It can take up to 2 years for you to establish your normal. So as you hit puberty, you get a period. You might not have this 30-day cycle right away. It can take up to 2 years for you to notice those trends and then figure out, okay, yeah, typically my cycle is about every 30 days or whatever it might be. And similarly, I would say normal as far as when we talk about like how much you bleed or symptoms you experience of it, which all of that, when I say normal, it's normal to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's not this standard of exactly what is normal. It's what's normal to you. But that, as you're going through puberty, it won't be normal right away. It can take up to 2 years. And I think that's important to not necessarily expect a 30-day cycle right away.
Yeah.
Do you want to hit on how that's similar to like RED-S recovery too? I'll just let you expand upon it instead of me.
So there will be variations between getting your period back, and it can be the number of days you bleed. It could be cramping. Your symptoms may change. In a personal experience of getting out of RED-S, for me was infrequent like multiple periods, meaning I would bleed and then 2 weeks later, I felt like I was getting my period again. And just kind of that rewiring and feeling flat or feeling fatigue was a frustrating time, thinking like, when does the cycle become normal like everyone else's becomes normal? So it's that, there's a lot of questions, amount of bleeding even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of, not all, maybe, 50% of our clients that come to us do have part of their struggles might be a missing period or irregular periods. And it's stemming from the nutritional imbalance in RED-S and their role with nutrition as an athlete. And so as we're working with clients who are recovering their periods, we celebrate so much with them when they get that first recovery period. And then one of the first things that I say to them is, okay, like, this is amazing. We got your first period, but we're not quite done yet. And I don't mean that to like bring us down, but it's we're not normal yet.
Right.
It's still going to take some time to establish that normal cycle. Now, as I was saying, the research says that it can take up to 2 years. I find in our clientele, if it comes to secondary amenorrhea, or what some call hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is where you once had a period and then lost it and you're gaining back, I find our clients can really get to finding their normal rhythm within 6 months.
I think so too. I would also say that is something that we also really push and influence, educate on them is that you're going to get it once, but we really want to keep prioritizing or still work within the guidelines we've given you as a female athlete with fueling pre-post workout, eating throughout the day, eating enough. Like, it's not just a one-time thing. It has to stay consistent. And then it was just through consistency of doing it every day, it just becomes their norm. And I think that's why it worked so well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey fans, I hope you are enjoying this conversation so far, and we'll be back to it in just a moment. But first, I want to pause and let you know that this episode is brought to you by the Female Athlete System of Transformation, aka the Fast Track to overcome disordered eating and use food as fuel to perform at your highest level. The Female Athlete System of Transformation is my unique program and proven systems to guide female athletes to understanding and implementing the proper nutrition for their sport, life, and health. Myself and my team of registered sports dietitians work one-on-one with clients to address their unique needs and counsel them through the nutritional and behavioral changes needed. Many female athletes who resonate with disordered eating, mental guilt around food and body, relative energy deficiency in sport or female athlete triad, amenorrhea, repeat injuries due to negligent nutrition, or frankly, just a lack of knowledge and understanding on their fueling needs, have seen incredible success in the Fast Track. After years of working as a sports RD, I've compiled the most effective ways for female athletes to learn nutrition, be supported, be challenged, and ultimately find their success with fueling as fast as possible. So don't wait another day. Get to your goals faster by joining the Female Athlete System of Transformation. Look in the show notes or head to the website to book a free call and learn more. Okay, now let's get you back to the conversation. Enjoy.
I think the first 3 recovery periods are the most up in the air, turbulent, like when is it going to come, you know, and then typically like period like 4, 5, and 6 is where it's like, because you've been so consistent with your fueling and training and everything we've taught you, suddenly it's like between period 3 and 4, it's like, okay, that was, we'll say 35 days. Then between period 4 and 5, oh yeah, that was 34 days. Then period 5 and 6, oh yeah, that was 34 days again. Okay. And then it's like keeps going of like, okay, I can kind of predict this now. So, but in research, again, for puberty, post like, okay, like I'm 13 years old, just got my first period. It might take you 2 years to establish that. But I don't have proof of this. I'm just saying in my clients, when it comes to recovering from secondary amenorrhea, I think we can get you to establish that normal within 6 months.
Yeah.
Because that's what our clients are doing. So, yeah. Now, this was a shocking one when we were looking up what is considered normal. I'm saying shocking, and I don't know what our listeners will think, but the average onset age of puberty is between ages 8 to 13 for girls. I think it is different for boys, but it's between 8 and 13. And I say it's shocking because when I hear 8 years old, I just think that's a little girl, and I can't imagine. I cannot imagine if I were 8 years old going through that. Like, I don't know what the heck I was doing at 8 years old, but I'm pretty sure I was like, you know, you just got out of diapers. Why do you want to put a pad on?
I'm thinking of immediately. I started thinking about this after we discussed this a little bit with the alumni girls and how much that influences your thoughts of being a child versus a woman. And I say this when I was in dance and transitioning to competitive dance, of having a period and having to I wasn't able to use pads because you couldn't have bulk in your leotard.
Dance, right. And again, I was a gymnast as a youth, and those are definitely something. And then what do? So then you stay home from practice. Or you don't go to the competition. Yeah. And this is why girls going through puberty have such a high dropout rate of sport, or then start to feel so self-conscious of their bodies and what it's doing. And that's why my lived experience, I was not young getting my period, and I've mentioned this on other podcasts. I'm happy to share more about it, but I was very late. So though never formally diagnosed at the time, I had what one would call primary amenorrhea my mom actually corrected me on this recently. So you may have heard me on other podcasts saying I didn't get it till I was about 18, but I actually was 17 or about 17 and a half. Yeah, my mom listens, and she corrected me at one point in time. She was like, no, I think you got a little before that. I was like, okay. And then the memories came back to me. But anyway, so I was so late, right? Yeah. And I had the opposite problem of I felt insecure that in 9th grade, all my girlfriends were talking about their periods. And I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. You know, I felt insecure in that regard. Yeah. But yeah, I do have this memory. I do have the memory of 5th grade PE teacher talking to us about menstrual cycles. So 5th grade, what was I, 10 years old at the time?
10, 11. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. I had no clue what she was talking about. But one of the girls in my class did have her period and already knew everything. And I also want to share a bit about this girl. She was a phenomenal soccer athlete at 10 years old. She was athletic and very, very good, very athletic, well known for her soccer skills. And she continued that all throughout, junior high school. And she was too, again, as so many people think as you might not get your menstrual cycle as an athlete, maybe you have lower body fat. And this just wasn't the case for her. She was even on the shorter side. I think she was only 5 foot tall and just kind of, or I think she was under 5 feet tall. She was a kind of just a smaller person and super athletic, and she still got her menstrual cycle super early. And I remember just in that PE class, and she was dealing with it. And I was like, it was so over my head.
It's oh my gosh, she's a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like me, I'm almost thinking like we're two completely different people, but we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The experiences and what we were going through were so different at that time. But yeah, per research, the average age of puberty is between 8 to 13. And it is considered primary amenorrhea if you are 16 or older without it, right? That's just our medical diagnosis. And so I think this is important because, again, if you are 13 years old and you don't have your period yet, I didn't at that time either. We don't freak out. We also look at genetics and family history, but it is something to say, okay, like, should we start looking at our nutrition, our activity levels, our sleep, our stress levels? And then if you do approach, 16 and you don't have it, again, that's also, I do want to say, like, talk to a doctor, a gynecologist. I know that not all of them are super well versed on nutrition and athletics. So if things that we've talked about on this podcast, like RED-S, female athlete triad, underfueling, disordered eating, are playing a role in your missing menstrual cycle, your doctor may or may not have knowledge on that. However, there's other things to double check, Is there a pituitary lesion? Is there ovarian tumors? Is there PCOS? There's other things that's worth exploring with the doctor for those who don't hit puberty.
I would say I really want to also take this part of our conversation and really try and normalize the fact that if you are 13, 14, 15 years old, don't just say that, oh, my period will come. Oh, you're just an athlete. Or, you're just, that's why you don't have it. You'll get it soon. But we want to get in front of that before we end up with more problems as the body's trying to develop. Because I think that is just the messaging we have today is she's just very athletic. And that's why she doesn't have it yet. But then we're getting to 15, 16 years old. And that isn't okay.
Right. Yeah. And that's why I think being curious.
Yep.
Yeah. When you are 13, again, we don't have to freak out, but being curious.
Being curious. Yeah.
Talking to a trusted family member, making an appointment with a doctor, or again, just like you said, if you are an athlete, looking into your nutrition.
Yeah. Or a mom can be like, is my daughter getting moodier? Is their body changing any? Like, are their hips, are they getting a different type of, they're not that straight composition anymore of like the shoulders widening, the hips widening a little bit. Like those are some signs of also being curious.
And then, this, we're talking about puberty right now, but we then establish our normal, which is again, normal for us throughout majority of our post-puberty into our adult life, but we hit changes again, right? So the average age of menopause is 51. Excuse me. The average age of menopause is 51. That's an average. So it can certainly start earlier.
Can I ask you a question?
Or can happen a little later. Sure.
I don't know if you know the answer to this question, and maybe that's homework for me to do, but let's say you have a past history of disordered eating or RED-S. Does that increase or decrease the rate at which you're going to get menopause?
I don't know. I think once you establish normal, I don't think that affects you later. Okay. The issue is, do women who are 40 or 45, are they in perimenopause or are they in RED-S?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
Yes. Yeah.
But no, I don't think that necessarily saying like, oh, because you had RED-S when you were 20 means you're going to hit menopause sooner. No.
Yeah.
Once I have I'm 20 years old, I've healed RED-S, and you've got another, 20, 30 years of having a normal menstrual cycle before you hit menopause.
This stuck with me yesterday because I was watching the Golden Girls, and they were talking about a woman who didn't get her period until she was like in her 20s. And then she had babies when she was in her 70s or 80s. I forget what kind of story.
Is this a true story?
No, Sophia was talking about her friend from Italy, and I was like, oh, is this real? And I'm like, wait.
I don't think so.
But it is a great, excellent point you bringing up. We do have women come into this program in their early or mid 40s lacking a period. and are athletic. And it is, some individuals' first thoughts might be, oh, are we in this menopausal stage in our life? But in fact, they are getting their periods, and it isn't that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more likely to start seeing. So as you age, I think it begins in between ages 25 to 45. Okay. I've got the research pulled up here.
Okay.
Between ages 25 to 45, your cycle length can start to lengthen.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say you did hit puberty at 13.
Mm-hmm.
From 13 to 25, you're more likely to have like a shorter cycle, like 28 days. And then between 25 to 45, it can start to lengthen. Now, not by much, by just up to like 1, 2, or 3 days. But you might start noticing, and I think women in their 40s start to notice, oh, my cycle is getting longer and longer.
Mm-hmm.
Where it used to be when I was in my 20s, my cycle was,
mm-hmm.
29 days. And now that I'm in my 40s, my cycle is 35 days, And so it can start to lengthen. But to declare menopause is going a full 12 months without any bleed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of women, again, we have many in our program that are like 41 or 46. And
mm-hmm.
I'm not convinced that I'm not convinced in their early 40s that that's menopause.
Yeah.
There might be some perimenopause, lengthening, fluctuations going on for sure. But I'm, when we look at their diet history and the fact that they're athletes, I'm like, well, we've got nutritional imbalances and you do have energy deficiency.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually been really interesting to work with some women who are able to then, oh yeah, I did, working with Lindsay and Jenna, and oh yeah, I have had 3 monthly cycles in
mm-hmm.
a row.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Even though I skipped it the last 3 months, it's like, oh no, better fueling did bring it back. And maybe it is just for a few more years, but I think that that's helpful. It really
Absolutely.
is, especially when we think about bone health. It's helpful to keep your period as long as possible.
As long as possible. You think of all the RED-S symptoms of your gut health, your cardiovascular health, your immunological health. Like, you're helping all of those things heal and get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and speaking of our cardiovascular health and things like that, I think this is another like turn in our conversation to just talk about how our menstrual cycles affect our health, because this is such a hot topic right now of like fueling and training to your menstrual cycle. And it's cool to learn more about your menstrual cycle so that you can take care of your body better. But I also I know you and I have had some side conversations about this, Jenna, about like, I don't know. It's almost like it seems very trendy right now. Fuel and train to your menstrual cycle. And
mm-hmm.
like you asked me the question, you were like, but do I have to?
And well, here's the other part too, is that like when you actually take a look at this, like race day event or performance day for that athlete doesn't really change overall. Like my race time isn't going to make a difference. It's about the training you do supporting that. Like, if I am feeling flat, if I am feeling fatigued, I'm going to adjust my training to that. But when you actually show up on race day, there's really no difference between the performance. And a lot of that is also psychological too, of like pumping yourself up, being in the moment. I'm here, I'm ready. So at the end of the day, it's like, what more food rules or guidelines do I really want to implement?
Yes. And I think that's why you said that to me. You were like, but do I have to fuel and train to my menstrual cycle? And it's like, no, you don't. Because if that is something that brings you more stress or feels like, oh, this is a food rule now that like, I need to focus on these foods during this time of the month and I shouldn't eat those foods during that time. It's like that holistically might not be helping you then. If that's bringing more stress or anxiety or rules or restriction to your life, then like, no, you don't. And maybe it's a little woo woo, but I think like, we can talk about like the feminine energies. And I'm like, I think so much it's for girls and women to just sometimes like relax and go with the flow more, honestly, helps you. And so it's cool. Like we did dig into the science of it with our alumni girls, and it's really cool to learn about this because in, some senses, knowledge is power, but also it's like, if this stresses you out, you don't have to track your cycle. You don't have to fuel differently just because you're in your luteal phase. Like you don't have to.
I think for my coming out of that whole call that we did with our girls was that I have a race coming up in May. And as I'm shifting into March, I will be upping up my mileage and doing more longer distance days to take maybe this as the quote or like the word using curious of what is this all, taking all this information and putting it into my training and see how the difference is. Will that influence how I do things moving forward? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it's good to have the information, take it in, see how it applies to me. But I think that's where I will take it right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, again, our alumni call was like an hour and a half long and and it's a conversation for the whole month. So, but some overarching things from an education standpoint to share with the listeners right now is, your menstrual cycle, you can kind of divide it into phases. We have your follicular phase, which is your first half. And then you have ovulation, which kind of ends the follicular phase. Ovulation is where we have created and released an egg. Mm-hmm. And then, so the second half of your phase, which is called the luteal phase. And I always remember, I'm like, first follicular, later luteal. Uh-huh. So that's how I remember FFLL. The first half of your cycle is follicular. The second half is called, the later phase is called luteal. And basically, once you create that egg after ovulation, this is where, during ovulation, creation of the egg, and then your luteal phase is where there's a lot of these hormonal changes that affect our health and therefore potentially our mood and our performance and things like that. So things like estrogen rising, things like progesterone rising, and ultimately what your body is doing is it's spending the entire luteal phase post-ovulation preparing for pregnancy. And then if you get pregnant, okay, good, you've been preparing for that. And if you don't get pregnant, then that's where your body's like, oh, I didn't need to do all that. I don't need this excess blood that I just built up. And so by the end of the luteal phase, your body recognizes I'm not pregnant, so I can get rid of this. And that's what a bleed is. That's what a period is you got rid of the extra blood that your body had built up over that phase because it was preparing for pregnancy, but you're not pregnant. And so it gets rid of it. Uh-huh. And so ultimately, I think when it comes to our performance as athletes, it is during that ovulation and then the luteal phase where our hormones really fluctuate. And that's where some techniques come in. And so one of the biggest things that I find fascinating is the rise in core body temperature of anywhere between 0.5 degree to a full degree that happens. So you see a peak in body temperature during ovulation and then a gradual rise in body temperature throughout your luteal phase. And we can see how this affects athletes for things like training in the heat, for things like sweat rate and therefore sodium needs, which affects our hydration or dehydration, increases our cardiovascular output and our heart rate, And again, I think for training in the heat and or endurance sports, like these things might play a role. And again, it's something to be curious about of how do I ensure, let's say you're a triathlete or an Ironman, like if the competition's going to be, in your luteal phase or when you're PMSing, these are things as far as like high level top performance goes, you would want to be curious about and know, how do I properly hydrate to prevent heat stroke, right?
Correct.
Now, the reality is in an Ironman, you should be curious about how to properly hydrate and prevent heat stroke no matter where in your cycle you are. But, we think about, doing a race in Hawaii or in a humid environment and your core body temperature is already 1 degree higher.
Correct.
For elite level competition, these are some things that might become important.
Prioritizing protein and fluids, increased temperature, maybe utilizing more protein at this time, which means like if you are
for
recovery, absolutely. And that affect sleep with the temperature rise. So we feel those shifts in sleep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so many of us feel that, right? We get the night sweats and it's kind of cool to learn that science and be like, oh, I got the night sweats when I ovulated or, because I am PMSing right now and that progesterone is higher. Fans, I hope you are enjoying the conversation. We are going to take a quick pause so I can tell you about our partners. They are so valuable in providing you with amazing products and helping keep this podcast going. First, Prevenix. Thanks to their incredible Joint Health Plus product, my aches and pains from running and honestly being a new mom, as crazy as that sounds, have literally disappeared. As I continue to push my body physically as an athlete, and frankly, as I continue to age, I was shocked at the aches I was beginning to feel in my knees, wrists, ankles. It seemed like omega-3s, curcumin, nothing was really working, but after just 1 month of Joint Health Plus from Prevenix, I felt a drastic improvement. Honestly, this is something I rarely experience with supplements, but Prevenix uses quality ingredients backed by sound science. Their products are pharmaceutical grade with extensive testing for safety, quality, and purity. They offer other supplements, including probiotics, omega, immune health, and a multivitamin, which I also use daily. And the science behind their multi has changed my opinion on multivitamins altogether. I used to never recommend them or take them myself, and now I recommend and take Prevenix Multivitamin, Mineral, and Antioxidant Plus daily. I am so impressed with Prevenix, and I can't wait for you to try. You can get 15% off your first order using the code RISEUP at checkout. The company also offers 100% money-back guarantee within 30 days because they stand by their products, and so do I. Head to Prevenix.com, Previnex.com, and use the code RISEUP, one word, at checkout for 15% off. For nutritional shakes and bars to fuel your body, head to Orgain.com and use the code RISEUP30 for 30% off your first order. Orgain's ready-to-drink nutritional shakes are my go-to to throw in my bag when I'm heading to the gym or to a trail to run, so that when I'm done, I've got a recovery option to refuel and rehydrate with right away. Orgain makes nutrition and sports nutrition that works. For repeat customers, check the show notes for more. And again, first-time customers, head to Orgain.com and use the code RISEUP30, all caps. And last, ladies, moms, every mom is an athlete. That's why Jen and Carrie have designed the best nursing and pumping sports bras. I cannot rave about these enough. I hate that most maternity bras have clips and don't support being active, but Jen and Carrie get that because they're moms and athletes themselves. They want you to be a mom and an athlete. So their stylish and athletic high-impact bras allow you to crush your workout and then feed your baby with comfort and style. They have saved me during this time of my life, keeping up with sport and momming. Please go check them out at jenandcarrie.com and use the code RISEUP10 for $10 off your order. You won't regret it. Again, jenandcarrie.com, RISEUP, all caps, RISEUP10 for $10 off. Let's get back to the episode.
We have a girl in the program right now that just got her first night sweats. She has not had her period yet, but she just got night sweats. And so it's very exciting time.
Yes, yeah.
Because we don't know what this means.
But it's likely meaning her hormones are shifting.
Right.
She had a, yeah. That is exciting. I know we always, whether it's RED-S recovery, HA recovery, you start to pick up on some of these like menstrual cycle symptoms, even if you don't have it just yet, you haven't bled just yet, but it's like, oh my gosh,
what?
Yeah. Sometimes you even feel a little bit of cramping happening. Yeah. Oh, good for her. I'm excited. I think another interesting like science thing is, again, with those hormone fluctuations, ovulation and then luteal phase, is we have some research about the increased injury risk. And so I actually dove into this with Professor Scientist, Exercise Physiologist Keith Barr in episode 100. And he shared with us research about, how estrogen increases. Basically, they have like a laxity effect on your tendons and ligaments. And then, so if your tendons and ligaments are more relaxed, then in sports that require like intensity and power output, that it's your like ligaments and tendons are going to struggle with that power output. And a more relaxed ligament and tendon can increase injury risk if you're then in a very intense soccer game and you're at minute, 85 and you've got to, I don't my terminology right now, but just imagine being in the thick of it in a soccer game where we see lots of injuries and twists and turns and short bursts of movements, and your ligaments and tendons are at increased risk of injury when estrogen levels are higher. So like during ovulation and then as you progress through the luteal phase. So this is like so interesting, the science. And again, head back to episode 100 to hear Keith Barr talk about that more in depth. It was a very science focused episode. But then it's like, okay, but then what do we do about that?
Yeah.
So are we not going to play soccer? Like, no, we're still going to play. He had an interesting perspective of, okay, if you were playing professionally, again, knowing where you are in your cycle could then have those proper conversations with, be it your coach, your athletic trainer, your strength coach and maybe somebody, if you've already had a history, you've already had 2 ACL tears, it's like, okay, tracking your cycle, knowing when you're more at risk so that, hey, if it's a game, it's a game. But if this is practice, hey, I'm, working with my strength coach, doing preventative measures. And even where the conversation of using birth control or hormones or oral contraceptives actually could be beneficial in a scenario like this. I think most of this conversation so far, you and I are focusing on natural cycles, but both you and I have used hormones in our lifetime. And so there's no harm, like there's a time and a place for that. And this Keith Barr mentions, if you're like an elite level soccer player with multiple ACL injuries, like maybe birth control is an option so that you're not seeing those fluctuations in estrogen. But we've got to make sure that's the right decision for you personally, right? Because there's benefits of a natural cycle too. So interesting. So there's so much we can learn and explore with our menstrual cycles. The science is just starting, I think.
It is. All of our science was male studies, and all of the recommendations we originally had through nutrition was through male studies.
Yeah.
And we're just starting to tap the surface for females. And so sometimes I do say to our girls, like, we don't really have all the answers yet. And it's hard saying that as a specialist, but that's just where we are. But also, at least we're here. And that was the thing. It was like, we don't have female studies because they have hormones, because there's estrogen, because there is progesterone. There's influences that will change those things.
Yeah.
So let's not make them a part of these studies. Low pain tolerance, let's not make them a part of the studies.
Yeah. And it's like, instead, it's like, no, let's study this. Let's study natural cycles. Let's study those who have long cycles. Let's study those who are on the pill. Let's study those who are on the IUD, because we need, oh my gosh, there's so many questions left unanswered right now. And I think also what you said that kind of struck me is, okay, we might, based on science, we're getting a lot more female specific science. So that's really cool. We still don't have all the answers. And then even as professionals right now and sports dietitians, it's okay, but what do we do with those answers? And that's where we're still figuring this out. And I think that's where, going back to the beginning of the conversation where I was saying what is normal, it's also what is normal for you.
Yeah.
We don't have these standards with research just yet. And so I think in working with a client or being a female athlete like myself, is still being curious as okay, we have this information about injury risk or core body temperature, and I know my cycle length, and then it's what's normal for me and what works with my lifestyle and my training and my goals as well. Like, I mentioned those things about, okay, if you're an Ironman and competing in Kona, or if you're an elite soccer player, there might be some little things that we could do based on the knowledge we currently have to minimize heat stroke risk, to minimize injury risk.
Yeah.
But then we think about, okay, or is it me, Lindsay, recreational runner, hoping to PR in the half marathon, but really it's like, okay, do I really need to pay like super close attention? Maybe some people would argue with me, yes, but I would say in my life, I've got a few other priorities to focus on right now. So I think for me, like that holistic nutrition approach, instead of like changing my nutrition every single week based on my cycle, is more important to me right now, just like
Right.
keeping stable nutrition. And did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just also thinking like a professional athlete, that's her job, right? We have our jobs where we also have stress and we also have like time devoted to doing that, where if you have the focus, you don't know whether or not like this week, if it was a high performing week for you in terms of your job and you're working overtime or like, you know, you're sick, like these things are also going to influence training and they're also going to influence your performance.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's not just your period.
That's just right. So there's so many other things that also could be getting in the way when you're just, I don't like to say we're all individual and unique, but when you are the recreational athlete versus high performance competitive, this may be their full-time job.
Yeah.
So that's where it is different to think about like, is this going to really make the difference? Or is it something else outside of this? Like the fact that I broke up with somebody and I'm like high strung, I've lost sleep. Like, is that it? That's affecting my performance.
Yeah. Yes. Because when it comes down to actually menstrual cycles and performance, like truly performance, we have very few studies and the studies we have are very poor, very poorly controlled. What does performance mean? Are we talking about running faster? Are we talking about running longer? Are we talking about jumping higher? Are we talking about lifting more? Are we talking like there's too many things to define optimized performance?
Yeah.
And then we have too many factors that affect performance. It's not just hormones. It's your sleep. It's your training that you just put in. It's genetics. And then there's the things you were mentioning, like stress and mindset. And that was something we did go over with our alumni girls too, was actually mindset. There were a couple studies that we did dive into on performance, and some showed, okay, better performance might be during the follicular phase, but some showed okay, maybe not. And there was this one really interesting study that showed it kind of had nothing to do with your hormone fluctuations or where in the phase you were, but they had their participants do a mindset questionnaire on like their excitement, their readiness, their confidence.
Okay.
And that's what determined performance that day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, like the person who had high hormones where you would think performance wouldn't be great actually showed up just super confident and like thrilled and excited to perform that day. And they did great.
Yes.
And so
positive self-talk can have such an influence on performance. Like
huge.
Is that the difference between winning and losing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so going back to, again, like if you are somebody who wants to learn and be curious and track your menstrual cycle, we also want to make sure that that knowledge doesn't get in your way. We don't want you to think, oh no, I'm in my PMS phase. My core body temperature is higher. And we don't want that to start freaking you out, because if that makes you mentally feel less prepared, you know, that could actually affect your performance by being nervous.
Yeah.
As opposed to feeling confident.
Right. Or also too, like, again, it's curious, you're curious. And we could say like your exercise prescription can change based on whether you're in like the follicular phase or the luteal phase, right? So you're kind of like higher performing at the follicular stage. Like you can kind of handle more in the gym or lifting and sets and things like that. But if you want to partake in some type of activity or class because it makes you happy, it doesn't make
during your luteal phase, then do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because also like the motivational factor of staying fit to keep you like, or whatever goals you have, like go with that too.
Yeah. You want to go with it. Yeah. Yeah. There's two sides to that coin. It's, I think in one sense, if you know where you are in your cycle, you're in your late luteal phase and you're not feeling motivated, then it's nice to not beat yourself up about that.
Yeah.
So, you know what? I don't need to force this workout right now. I'm not feeling that good. And sometimes the knowledge of, this is my PMS phase. You know what? I don't need to push it. You know, a few days from now, I'll be feeling better probably. And I can challenge myself then.
Yeah.
Then great. Then that knowledge helps you. On the flip side, if you're late PMS phase, but you're like, I really want to go crush this workout. And then go crush the workout.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Go do that.
Just hydrate.
Just hydrate. Yes. And I hope that we are speaking to all female athletes right now. We have clients who are elite athletes. We have clients who are recreational athletes. We have clients that are recreational, but super freaking competitive and want to see how far they go, you know? And so again, this is an individualized choice once you are knowledgeable about your menstrual cycles as to like how you want to use this information. That's totally up to you.
Yeah.
If the elite level athlete wants to not care, that's fine. If the recreational athlete wants to care, that's fine. But I think also just, with nutrition, this is such an interesting thing in our jobs. Like I didn't know 10 years ago that I would be helping athletes with their nutrition based on their hormone levels and menstrual cycles. Did you?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
All I knew like years ago was if you didn't have your period, maybe what is your iron? Are you anemic? Like those are the questions like you asked.
Yeah.
And that was it.
So basic.
So basic. And now we're just getting started.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm going to brag, but I'm going to brag right now.
Yep.
I'm proud of myself and I'm proud of you. Like I'm proud of myself for all that I've learned and dove into this research in the past few years because there was a point in time not too long ago where I was working with an all male population and had you as well. Yes. You still do in your other part-time jobs. So it's just like, it's so fascinating and I'm so excited. And I think it's so cool that I am proud of myself because I'm like, wow, I know so much about this now and I'm helping people through it. So that's really cool. And definitely with the issue of whether it is, again, hypothalamic amenorrhea, which is kind of another term for that secondary amenorrhea or the fact that you're not producing a period because of issues with your hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis or even primary.
We categorize that as a RED-S as well. Well,
that's what I'm saying. So HA can happen truly because of purely stress as well.
Yep.
So we want to be mindful of that. But another huge reason for HA is the imbalance between nutrition and what your body needs. So RED-S could be the imbalance because it's energy deficiency to sport. But this can also happen in people who don't consider themselves to be athletes because there's could be underfueling or an imbalance between how much they're fueling and how many steps they take in a day, right? And then we also have HA because somebody is living a very stressed life because your hypothalamus is in your brain. So our physiological stress, which is our physical stress, impacts it, but also our psychological stress impacting our brain can cause HA to happen as well. So, I think when I'm like, we just signed on some new clients that actually are struggling with this. And it's one of those things where doing that deep dive into their athletic history, how much are they training? How long have they been training? How intensely? And then the deep dive into their nutritional history. Do they have a history of underfueling? Do they have a history of maybe back in college, they might be 30 years old now, but in college, they did have an eating disorder. And that's when their period went missing in the first place. It's like, okay, then the root problem of this is likely, the RED-S and the nutritional imbalance. Or maybe there's somebody that doesn't have a history of a disordered eating or eating disorder, but when they describe their diet to me, they say things like, well, I eat really clean. I focus on vegetables and protein. And trust me, if you tell me that, I'm going to say, wonderful. Vegetables and protein are important.
Yeah.
But you also just told me, you train 12 hours a week and you've got, this goal competition coming up and then I'm like, okay, there's an imbalance there because you told me that, you're kind of concerned about your weight and you focus on proteins and veggies. And so I'm getting information that your carbohydrate intake might not be that good, or you might be so focused on your weight that you're not fueling for your performance as you need to.
The pre-workout, the post-workout, that timing of stuff. Yeah. Yep.
So, and this is why, RED-S is challenging to diagnose because there's a lot of factors, but that's where you and I come in as the dietitians to explore, not only understand how are you fueling and training right now, but explore their past history of that and how that might have affected their hormones up until this point.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I think we'll wrap up this conversation because if you are concerned about your hormonal health and your nutrition, like I said, I'm bragging right now. I'm like, we know this stuff. Like, come to me and Jenna. We know this. We know how nutrition affects your hormones and therefore performance as an athlete. And that's something we can help you figure out. and have that conversation with too of like, what is, trying to figure out what is the root cause. And then in our programs and working together, it's not the only thing that we do, but it's an important part of it.
You just brought up something too that, in my own experience of diagnosis of anorexia and having to get my period back, but then losing my period to RED-S were two totally different scenarios.
Oh yeah, they were. Yeah.
So yes, to talk about what are their current lifestyle and what are their habits, like they were two completely different things, but I will say.
But it happened twice in your hormones were affected twice in your life because of this nutritional imbalance. But once it was more of that intentional, like diagnosed eating disorder, it was really a mental thing you had to overcome.
Yes.
And then another time it was, mentally you're doing really great and you're super knowledgeable about food, but you weren't fueling to train for marathons appropriately. And you had to address that. That was somewhat more like, okay, this is happening unintentionally, but it's still happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's actually kind of cool that you have those two different experiences, because I know it helps you when you're coaching our clients.
It does, because it also allows, and for anybody who's listening now, you don't have to be underweight and not have your period. Like there's a box for you.
Yeah. Because that's what you were during RED-S.
Exactly.
Like your weight wasn't an issue, but you lost your period. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when I'm working with clients, I have a very different personal experience of, like I said, I did struggle with that, I suppose, primary amenorrhea that really went undiagnosed. I also had a medical condition thrown in there. I had an ovarian tumor that was removed at age 18. And then I went on birth control for the next, 7 years.
Yeah.
And so to me, I never went through this process of like losing my period. I was on birth control and I think totally covered it up, because during those 7, 8 years I was on birth control, I know there was underfueling. There was also body image issues. There were disordered eating habits, and there were performance like lows or times where I was like, this, performance wasn't optimized, but I was on birth control. So that's just a totally different experience. And, and that's also why I just also want to share, like, there's no judgment if you are using birth control, IUD, like I'm educating on natural cycles just because we're having research be put out about that and stuff. But like, we can also get curious about the use of hormones and oral contraceptives and how that affects our body too. That's a whole nother episode. Yeah. So I guess stay tuned, keep listening, keep tuning in each week, a whole nother episode. Maybe we'll dive into some of the science we know about those things. But Jenna, thanks for having this conversation.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, if you are a true fan of female athlete nutrition, then I would love if you could support our podcast by spreading the word. Share a review on your listening channel, give us 5 stars. It really helps get the word out and get the show more views to positively impact others. Also, you can support the podcast by joining our Patreon. Head to patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition to consider a donation, or even better, join our membership where you get extra monthly content and perks. We don't want you to simply listen alone. We want you to be a part of a community and a movement of fierce, fit, and fueled female athletes. So patreon.com/femaleathletenutrition is where you can do exactly that, learn more, and join. A huge thanks to our affiliates and partners as well. Once again, Prevenix, Inside Tracker, Orgain, Practice Better, Jen and Carrie. Please go check them out, and their links in the show notes where you can get deals and discounts. Last, be sure that you do more than just listen. If you need help with fueling, it's time to take action. Head to my website to learn more. You can either book a free call with me to learn more about our coaching programs and how we can work directly with you, whether it's the fast track or otherwise. Or you can take our online self-study course, Female Athlete Nutrition. You can literally sign up and gain access right now. You can explore our downloadable products, including the RED-S Recovery Guide, High Iron Fueling Guide. Or if you are a coach of a team, check out our brand new Coaches Toolkit for teams. You can also just learn more. We have a blog, a RED-S quiz to see if RED-S is affecting you. If you need help, I want you to get help fast. Too many girls and athletes struggle with nutrition, but you don't have to any longer. You can rise up with the power of nutrition, take action today in any of these avenues and become fierce, fit, and fueled. Links in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.